Okay guys, today we're going to be reviewing the Call of Cthulhu. This is a RPG by Chaosium, and it's a murder mystery type RPG based on the writings of H.P. Lovecraft, and this is one of my all-time favorite RPGs. So I definitely want to dive into this, and it's something that I think whether you're a D&D fan or you're a fan of other RPGs, I think you will enjoy this, especially if you're into horror and different types of RPGs like that. So open up the book. We have a nice portrait of H.P. Lovecraft there. We have basically title page. Going into this, let's see, forward here. Love the artwork in this book as well. Table of contents. This is an excellent book if you're into, like I said, any kind of like murder mystery type stuff or horror type stuff, because in this book you're not necessarily playing the heroes, you're just playing investigators that are trying to solve a mystery, and a lot of times you're just trying to survive. You're put in these environments where there's some kind of evil coming after you, and either you find some kind of way to defeat it, or you're just trying to find a way to get away from it and live to tell another day. So here we're going into just the entrance page here, where it's basically just talking about, welcome to Call of Cthulhu, the game overview, examples of play. Never played a role-playing game before. It's kind of like intros to, your standard type of RPG. If you are a D&D player and you've never played anything else, something like this is worth reading into, because this will kind of get you up to speed with how it is to run like a Call of Cthulhu game and like a horror game in general, because it is different to run a murder mystery type game than it is to run your standard fantasy. This is a D100 based system, so you have several skills and you have to roll under the skill that you have. So for instance, let's say you have 45 in fighting, you have to roll under a 45 in order to succeed. So it's actually a roll low and succeed type of game. Chapter 2. It's a little forward on H.P. Lovecraft here. Creating investigators. So they have your standard types of attributes like you do in a lot of other types of games. So strength, con, size is an attribute, dex, appearance, and intellect, and power and education as well. They have luck. So luck in this game is sort of like if you're trying to find something in the game world, I reach around to, is there anything by me I can use as a weapon? Or, I try the door. Is the door unlocked? The keeper, which is the GM in this game, can call for a luck roll. And what that means is if you roll under your luck, it means you succeed on this. So like maybe you find the door is unlocked or you find a weapon by you. So that's an interesting characteristic of this game. And I really play up luck a lot. I think it's a really interesting point. Here's all about how to make a breakdown of how to make characters. What the numbers mean, that's how they're translated into the game world. Here's a sample character, create a backstory. So natively this game takes place in the 1920s, but you can run it in any other time period. There's supplements to run modern versions. There's supplements to run medieval versions. There's even a book about the French Revolution. There's quite a lot of different time periods that you can play in. There's treasured possessions you can roll for your investigator, meaningful locations. These are cash and assets, living standards. Some optional rules. This is your sort of sample character sheet here. So these are the attributes here. You have, strength, con, size. Some of the newer ones you might not be familiar with if you play other RPGs are education, which is sort of like your general knowledge of the world and of different like current events going on. And then there's also power, which translates to your sanity as well as your magic points. So that's something that can be very useful as well. There are spells in this game, but spells are very hard to come by, and they actually cost you sanity. And your sanity is tracked over here, where slowly throughout the course of the investigation, things are going to cause damage, so to speak, to your sanity. And that's going to slowly drag your sanity down to the point where once you hit 0, you're actually insane. And then you're basically taken over by the GM, and he controls your character. Maybe you become a villain, or maybe you break down and you're no longer able to partake in the investigation. A lot of things could happen, potentially. Here's your luck score. And then it dives into, here's your different kinds of skills. So for instance, if this character is going to make a fighting brawl roll, they'd have to roll under a 25 to make what they call a normal success. Then under half of that, rounded down, which would be 12, is a hard success. So that's half of your value. And then 1/5 of your value is called an extreme success. So that is the bottom number. So if you're doing opposed rolls, the level of success that you get that's greater than the opponent, that means that you win ultimately. The second page is kind of just like backstory, gear, cash. It's a quick reference. This is a further deep dive into the skills in the game. This is the type of game where your skills are very broad. There's a lot of different types of things that you can pick. For instance, accounting. You'd be surprised at how many times something like accounting will actually come into play when you're going into an investigation and you're looking into a mob and their ties, and you find different ledgers and stuff. You make an accounting roll to say, well, I find a discrepancy, and this is something that we can bring up, and it furthers along the clues that you find and the different kinds of things that happen within the game. It's archaeology. Computer use if you're playing modern. It's driving, dodge, firearms, history, jump, languages, locksmith, mechanical repair, occult, ride, read lips, sleight of hand. This goes into the game system. When to roll dice. Pushing rolls. What I really like in this game is there's a mechanic called pushing rolls. And what that does is if you fail a roll, say you're trying to lockpick, you fail your lockpick roll, you can say to the GM, well, I would like to push the roll. And then the GM will tell you, okay, if you push the roll, maybe you'll make a lot of noise, or there's going to be some kind of dire consequence if you fail that secondary roll. So it gives you another shot to try something. But if you fail it, it's sort of like getting a fumble, and where something catastrophic is going to happen. And I've seen that come into play so many times, and it's just such an interesting part of the campaign. A little bit about fumbles and criticals, about your luck. As a bonus dice and a penalty dice system, fairly similar to like 5e or other games that have it, where you add a extra tens position, and that becomes your bonus dice or your penalty dice, where in the bonus version you're taking the higher of the two, and in the penalty you're taking the lower of the two. Investigator development. There isn't really levels in this game. It's a skill-based game, so you level up your skills over time. So slowly you start kind of attributing more skill points towards different things, and that's how your character kind of changes over time. Some optional rules. It's combat. Combat in this game is insanely lethal. There's a lot of different things that can just basically one-shot your character. So that's something that you have to keep in mind when you're playing this. It is a very lethal game, but that kind of adds to the suspense of it as well. A typical firearm will do anywhere from like a D10 to like 2d6 or 3d6 damage. So the typical investigator has about 10 health. So it will end your character's life very quickly if you go in guns blazing. incentivizes like combat as a last resort, and I really like that. There's a flow chart here, so if you're new to playing, this is very helpful to use because there's actually a sort of counter ability in this game. It's when you're hit with an attack, you have two options. You can choose to dodge, which if you make your roll, you avoid all the damage coming in, and there's also something called a fight back, which is like a parry. And if you make your fight back roll, you actually get a free attack on that round that the enemy goes to attack you. So it can be very useful if you're a very hardy combat fighter. You can actually do a lot of damage on the enemy's turn to attacks that are coming in on you. All about firearms, automatic weapons. Like I said, firearms are devastating in this game. Tracking damage. Healing is fairly slow in this game. If you take a major wound, which is half or more of your damage in a single attack, it takes a week to heal that roll. So very often you'll have investigators that get in a sort of a combat, and then they're out for like a week or so because they're so damaged. Here's a combat damage flow chart. Chases. They have a really good mechanic for chases in this game, and chases are a lot of fun. And this is one of those games where sometimes it's better just to run away, especially if you're facing off at like a monster, something along those lines. A lot of times the monsters are completely immune to damage, or they take very little damage from physical attacks. So it's much better off running away from them than actually directly facing them. Setting up a chase. Different rules for movement in vehicles. Here's all about sanity. This is a really core element of this game. There's a thing called temporary insanity. So if you lose 5 or more sanity as a result of a single roll, then you have the possibility of going temporarily insane, and it basically does like a small sort of bout of madness to your character, where maybe they scream and run off, or maybe they go into a fit of rage. There's a lot of different things that can happen from it that really adds to play and makes it very interesting. Here's a bout of madness roll. So there's different amnesia, feigning, paranoia, phobia. There's a lot of different things that can happen to your character. I find role-playing insanity is very, very interesting for players. So they really enjoy that as their sanity is slowly slipping down. They like to role-play these characters where, their sanity is slipping away and they're getting more and more desperate, more and more paranoid. It's treatment from insanity. Sanity recovers very slowly in this game, so it's more so in between campaigns or game sessions that you're going to gain sanity, and you can gain sanity very often from like completing missions. They'll give you like a small amount of sanity, but it kind of is just enough to stave off some of the results rather than to fully heal your sanity. Here's magic. Magic is very devastating in this game. It's very if you're using like a damaging spell, it does a ton of damage. If you're using like a manipulation spell, it can, you can bend people's minds. You can do various things with them. But very often spells come with a sanity loss as well. So the more that you use spells, so slowly your character starts slipping more and more into madness as they're beginning to cast these. Section on playing the game, preparing to play, setting the tone. Creating investigators, NPCs, using props, investigator backstory, It's really good to read this if you're not used to playing like horror games, because it's very different than playing like your standard D&D game, and you have to run it very differently than you would running a D&D session, because you want to make the players feel very vulnerable. You want to make them feel very alone, and you want to make it feel like the world's against them. That way it kind of sets in this certain amount of dread where, you know, there's this large cult, it's, you know, worshiping some kind of evil deity, and, you know, there's hardly anything the players can do about it. They're just trying to survive and maybe trying to stop it in some fashion, but it's very interesting on how it plays out. Failed sanity rolls, delusions, scaring the players, ending a story, creating scenes, using Lovecraftian themes, there's a lot of good information on here on how to like craft different sessions. There's a map of Arkham right here. This is, if you're not familiar with it, it's like the standard type of area where a lot of the Lovecraft stories take place. You might have heard of like Arkham Asylum from Batman, that was based on the writings of H.P. Lovecraft. This is all about using Mythos tomes, so you can find books that'll give you like forbidden knowledge, and they'll increase your Cthulhu Mythos score, which is basically like a knowledge into the kind of deities and the evil entities that are basically plaguing you. So sometimes you can make a Cthulhu Mythos roll, and you can find out something about the enemies and the monsters around you. Different occult books. Grimoire. Opposed power rolls. Here's some different types of spells that you can cast. Cause, cure, blindness. Contact deities. Create zombies. A lot of the spells, like I said, are very powerful in this game, so when your players get them, it really is going to change up how the course of the story goes, which is interesting, and a lot of them come out of very heavy sanity loss as well, so that's something to keep in mind too. And they're also limited up to their magic points, which players don't have a lot of magic points, so it takes them some time to heal them back, and they can't really spam the spells too much. Here's some artifacts. Monsters, beasts, and alien gods. It's a little size chart here. It shows like a standard human here. Different types of creatures. Very interesting. Great Cthulhu there. Here's sort of like your monster manual-esque type area. Dark Young. You can definitely tell, like, some of these monsters, like this Dimensional Shambler, for instance, they get 2 attacks around, and they do a D8 plus their damage bonus, which is, their damage bonus is a D6. So they're doing 1D8 plus 1D6. So that is enough there to possibly shred an investigator in a single turn, and they get 2 attacks. So you can definitely tell that your players are going to want to be running away from these things and not directly fighting them. The ghouls and ghasts and zombies and different types of interesting creatures here. Azathoth, one of the great old ones. Great Cthulhu. Start getting into some of the gods here. Nyarlathotep. Yogg-Sothoth, mummies, skeletons, zombies, some animals that you might run into, some optional rules, scenarios. Amidst the ancient trees. I've never actually went through this one. This seems like a really interesting scenario. Never played this one before. Crimson Letters, another scenario. I haven't actually played this one either. This would be an interesting scenario to run through. One of the really popular ones is The Haunting. It's a classic scenario, and I'd highly recommend it if you're just getting into Call of Cthulhu. It's a nice, like, sort of haunted house type vibe where you're investigating the past residents of this mansion that has been abandoned and has a really interesting outcome. So if you're a keeper, I would definitely recommend as a first playthrough running that scenario. So your equipment list towards the end. Weapons, illegal weapons. Quite a lot of different weapons in this game. Different weapons for different time periods and different situations your characters can find themselves in. The summary of the game rules. This is really good just as like a reference for a keeper. The combat flow chart, chase rules, summarizing sanity, summarizing magic, and yeah, here's the index. So I would highly recommend this game to anybody that plays any kind of TTRPGs because I think it's worth a shot. Even if you think like, hey, maybe my players aren't going to enjoy it, if you think that your players are going to enjoy any kind of horror setting, I think this game is for you. It does have a little bit more of a mature theme to it. You're going to be talking about violence and different things along those lines. So as long as your players are interested in that, then I think they're going to be interested in this game. Again, it's not really about being a hero and like surviving everything that comes your way. It's more about or rather, it's not about becoming a hero and defeating everything that comes your way. It's more about just surviving, just to live another day and possibly defeat the cults that are, trying to stop the world or end the world. And there's several campaigns for this that are out. Massive Nyarlathotep was recently reprinted, and I'd highly recommend that one. I played that years ago. Fantastic campaign. There's another one, Beyond the Mountains of Madness, which is like an Antarctica type expedition game where you're trying to look into this lost expedition that went there. Highly recommend that as well. I played that too, and I am currently running Horror on the Orient Express, which takes place on a train that crosses through Europe. And there's sort of a cult that's tailing the players on that. So it's a really interesting campaign, and I highly recommend it. I highly recommend this game to anybody that's a fan of TTRPGs. So, yeah, if you've ever played Call of Cthulhu, let me know in the comments below. And as always, please like and subscribe and comment. Thanks.